Dear Jagex, thank you very much for giving the old school Runescape community the opportunity to take a test drive on the upcoming sailing skill. Sailing is something that I have been excited about ever since it first got pitched, and I do truly believe it is going to be a phenomenal addition to the game. Having said that, I would like to express my honest thoughts and opinions on the content within the Sailing Alpha, both the good and the bad. I'll start with something good. The boat customization features were really cool. Being able to upgrade your hull and your sail, as well as add additional functions to your ship like the wind catcher and a cannon, was a very nice feature. The wind catcher in particular was a great thing to include, as it allowed for greater control over the speed of the boat, which I was quite grateful to have, particularly during the Barracuda trials. However, one complaint that I have about the wind catcher is that it is very close to the helm of the ship, so many times I found myself accidentally turning off my wind catcher when I meant to man the helm. The click box of the helm is too small in my opinion, especially with how often I found myself having to re-click the helm in order to begin steering the ship again, either because I accidentally clicked something that made my character leave the helm, or because every time I used an item or interacted with an NPC, my character unmanned the helm. And in regard to accidentally unmanning the helm, I found that this happens way too often, especially when all I did was use an item like the current duck. Of course I'm going to want to follow the duck immediately after I release it, but if you forget to reman the helm, the duck is going to swim away before you realize you're not even steering the ship. This unmanning issue was particularly frustrating during the Barracuda trials. There were many times I accidentally made my character unman the helm, which caused me to go off my intended path or crash into something, forcing me to reset the trial. Speaking of resetting the trial, I don't like that when you just flat out quit a Barracuda trial, the game just keeps you where you are instead of teleporting you back to the NPC who initiated the trial like it does when you reset. One time during a Barracuda trial, I crashed into an island and I quit the trial instead of resetting it. I did this thinking that I would teleport back to the start of the trial like you do when you reset, so that I wouldn't have to fumble with the reverse controls to get my boat unstuck. But instead of taking me back to the start, it kept me there, still stuck. I think that when you quit a Barracuda trial, it should teleport you back to the start of the trial like it does when you reset. Okay, so that was a lot of critiques, so let me say some more good things as a palate cleanser. The new islands from the alpha were all great, and each of them had a certain aura of mystery to them that I found very enjoyable. I also liked how there were some areas where the ocean looked quite vast and empty, which is something you would expect to see when you're sailing. Obviously there can't be too much of this or else traveling around would be very boring, but I think you balanced the amount of new content with the amount of vast empty water very well. The rate of XP gain also seemed quite reasonable to me. Getting a small amount of XP every time I trimmed my sails felt nice, and the extra XP that I got from using the wind catcher was great. If anything, I would almost say that the wind catcher XP was maybe a little too high. It was pretty much the only thing I did to get from level 29 sailing to level 30, and it didn't take me very long at all. Okay, now let's talk about the out-of-sea events you can do. I only have two complaints here, one minor one and one major one. I'll start with the minor one, the Mermaid's riddle. How is the answer to this riddle willow stalk? I saw literally hundreds of people trying to solve this riddle and none of them were able to work it out. Then, when I told them the answer, none of them understood how that could possibly be the answer, and I never understood it either. I got the answer because someone else told me, and even he didn't understand why willow stalk was the answer. And the major complaint that I have is the weather troll event. I understand that the idea is that you need to find the area where the wind is circling. With that in mind, I kept following the weather station's readings and found myself doing laps around Entrana. So I came to the logical conclusion that I must need to go onto Entrana. Well, when I stepped foot onto the Entrana dock, I saw that the whole island was blocked by crates, and even though I wasn't even technically on the island yet, I was knocked out by a monk and thrown back to Port Sarum. After I banked my weapons and armor and learned that I can't use the normal way to get to Entrana since this is a sailing alpha, I didn't know what to do. The wind was circling Entrana, but I wasn't allowed to go to the center of the circle by entering Entrana. So once again, I had to give up and ask somebody. And they told me it was the section of water between Crandor and Entrana, which made no sense to me since I had already been in that area several times while doing my laps around Entrana. But I went back to see if it would work, and what I learned is that the spot you need to be in for the weather reader to work is very precise. Too precise, in my opinion. I had used my weather reader in that area several times, but I assume because I was a few tiles off, it didn't work correctly. This, along with the Willowstock riddle, is a great example of an I give up, let me look up the answer activity, which there should be none of when we're not even level 30 yet. I understand wanting to have some challenging, maybe even frustrating activities for sailing, but when the content is meant to be for players with a sailing level lower than 30, I think it's appropriate to allow for a little more leniency in these tasks. The weather troll issue can be solved by simply expanding the radius of which the station can be used to complete the task. Also, make the circling winds more clear, because they were absolutely leading me to circle Entrana, but Entrana turned out to not be the answer. Okay, now let me finish off with a few more good things, and then I'll give my closing thoughts. The exploration tasks with the spyglass and finding noteworthy things at sea, like the treacherous rocks and the mysterious tablet, were cool. It did a great job of creating that feeling of exploration. Even though most of us who are playing the alpha are very familiar with Lumbridge, the Wizard's Tower, Karamja, Draenor, and most of the other areas from the alpha, I could imagine how good it would feel as a brand new player to come across these exploration events while you're sailing around the coasts of Misthalin and Asgarnia. Even as a veteran player, I found this to be enjoyable. I do also think it's cool that there are different boats that have different advantages and disadvantages. I like that the raft doesn't just become completely useless after you reach level 10 and unlock your small boat. You need to use the raft to get into small areas to complete your exploration tasks, and I can think of many ways within the main game that a raft can be used where a boat couldn't. One other thing I think you've done right, though others may disagree, is port tasks. I've heard a lot of people complain that the port tasks are too dull and are little more than fetch quests, but I think you guys did a good job with them. These aren't meant to be exciting content so much as they're meant to be a way to get a little sailing XP while you're going wherever it is that you're going. Sure, they may be a little dull, but they're kind of supposed to be. These tasks are low-level content and were never intended to be the meta for sailing XP, as you've made clear several times. So, some may disagree, but I have no complaints about port tasks other than one very minor critique. I do think it needs to be made more clear what number of crates you're supposed to be delivering. I did a port task where I thought I was supposed to be delivering 1 crate, but it turns out I was supposed to deliver 4, and it was a little annoying to have to go back and get those other 3 crates. You could say it's my fault for not reading the task carefully enough, but I found that many people were making this exact same mistake. So, that's my one request for port tasks. Make it more clear how many crates you're supposed to deliver. So, Jagex, here are my closing thoughts. I am still looking forward to sailing. Even if you release sailing exactly as it currently is, without fixing any of the problems I've mentioned, I would still play it. But the team working on sailing has mentioned passionately, many times, that this new skill can't just be good enough. It has to be an absolute home run. And I believe you when you say that. I can tell that you've put in a lot of hard work trying to make this skill as good as it can possibly be. That's why I made this video, to share my thoughts on where you guys have done it right and where I think there's room for improvement. I hope you take my suggestions into consideration. Thank you for listening, and thank you anyone else who stuck around to the end of this video. I'll see you all next time.